Hello everyone, I'm Josh Rubin, and it is a pleasure and a privilege to be here with this webinar sponsored by the Cantor Foundation with this panel, very distinguished panelists, and I want to thank all of you very, very much for tuning in. It is really an honor to be in a room full of 10 people, all of whom have just devoted themselves so much to realizing this vision. The way of background, some required disclosures. My day job, that's where my paycheck comes from. I am in the Department of Learning Health Sciences, the first in the nation at a medical school at the University of Michigan Medical School. I'm a member of the interim steering committee of the Learning Health Community, and I'm vice president of the board of directors of the Cantor Family Foundation. I'm going to be sort of alternating between those three hats today. If I say anything really stupid, I'm not wearing any of those hats, it's just me. And I will try to make clear which hat I'm wearing when, but all three are about working to realize the learning health system. I also wanted to very quickly acknowledge my boss, Dr. Chuck Friedman, and he and I both are dedicated to this holy crusade, and he and I share slides sometimes, so some of these slides will be his. I was looking for a quote to introduce this, and I thought about the theme of togetherness and going far really sticks. There's an old African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. But then I thought about it some more. We got to go far, we got to go together, but we also got to go fast. I'm about to introduce the man of the hour, but first I wanted to say a few words about two women who very much deserve beyond recognition that I can give them here. But first is Danielle Edwards, who's put together every detail of this thing so masterfully and unbelievably. And second, but definitely not least, is Nancy Cantor. And she has done so much for so many years to make this happen, and been such a source of support. And Joe and Nancy have been married for 62 years, and that in and of itself deserves major recognition. So this is two pictures of Joe Cantor taken the day he was knighted. Yes, this was last year in Washington, D.C. He was knighted for his service in World War II. He is a World War II veteran. He is a grandfather. He's a self-made entrepreneur who made his fortune building businesses with lots and lots of data to inform decisions. And he's a patient that was very frustrated when he didn't have that data to make a decision about a life or death treatment. And he became really one of perhaps the original visionary of the learning health system, and that's his book. Buy a copy of his book. My story of Joe really begins after doing a little contracting work for him. I was inspired by his vision. I mailed him 2 books in 2009 in a letter. It's the low-tech introduction. Mailed him a letter with 2 books. One was about learning systems and analytics, and the other was about mass collaboration. He responded back to me with a poem, his favorite poem, called It Couldn't Be Done. It's about doing the impossible, and it sits on his desk. That poem is such an anthem, such a theme for this whole movement, that it's going to fit into the title of this presentation and a couple of stories I'm going to tell. A little more about Joe. He's been very highly recognized. Bob Dole has said, anyone who says one man can't make a difference hasn't met Joe Cantor. George Mitchell talking about this learning health system idea. It's so simple, so logical, and so powerful in its implementation, it boggles the mind. Our society hasn't done this before now. There's bipartisan support for this idea. Now on to this panel. And the only way I can introduce these people is they are the crazy ones. As Steve Jobs said, the ones crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. There's a few commonalities in this panel. Every one of these people is a leader at what they're doing. Every one of them has an absolute unmitigated passion for this learning health system. Everyone has done something in their free time, has given freely themselves to make it happen. And in some ways, that's where the parallels end. What makes this panel really special, it's a very diverse group. It's people that have looked at and approached this problem from every altitude. There are people in the trenches building key enablers, and there are people at the very top, highest, trying to connect things together, and everyone in between. And if we bring this kind of diversity together, we can do something. I am so privileged because I have worked with almost everybody on this panel for half a decade or more in some capacity or another to realize this. 3 of them are former bosses, and that never happens when you're in a room with 3 former bosses. Obviously, Joe Cantor was my former boss. I was the executive director of the Cantor Foundation from 2010 to 2013. I'll be talking even more about him during the presentation. I have Richard Singerman in here, who was my boss, supervising me on a project leader for the military health system at IBM. And I remember, I hadn't been there that long, and I was looking him up, the project we're going to do, and his bio begins that he has advanced degrees in physics from MIT and Cornell, a graduate degree in applied mathematics from Cambridge, and he has done so many other amazing things since then in government, in the private sector, building his own business, connecting social services, looping around to not just generate knowledge, but take knowledge generated and get it where it needs to go. And once looking at the beginning of the bio, it sounds like the start of Iron Man. Other former boss on this panel, Janet Marchabroda, topic of They Couldn't Be Done stories. She built eHealth Initiative, I think in her basement or her garage is where this all got started. If you look on their website, look at who their members are and what they've done. eHealth Initiative it never got huge in terms of size and staff, but it made a massive impact and has a massive footprint in this space. And it's fair to say health IT would not be the same in this country if it weren't for eHealth Initiative. And Janet has gone on to do amazing other things since then. Most recently, she's been, for at least the past few years, I believe, doing bipartisan policy center work on health IT. I think that's it for my former bosses, but there are people that I almost treat like bosses because they work so hard on this interim steering committee of the learning health community with me. Janet is one of them, but also we have Holt Anderson, who built this organization called NCHICA and ran it for 20 years. Holt, I couldn't think of what the right rock star metaphor to compare you to is, but you're like a rock star in this field that just keeps getting better and better. And the thing is that Holt, you talk about something interesting that you hear someone doing, and Holt will honestly tell you how he was working on the same kind of thing 10 or 20 years ago and making it happen. He most recently has sort of volunteered to make it his project to be a facilitator to think about governance for a whole learning health system. Remotely, we're going to have Landon Dane, who's at CDISC, and I like almost everything he's done in his career with one exception. He was the CIO of Duke, which is incredible. He was the CIO of Duke's medical system. He was the CIO also of Ohio State, and since I work for Michigan, I'm obliged to say, no, not cool. I'm kidding. We actually work with Ohio State on things, and they're great. And again, he's just been an absolute pioneer. He's at CDISC. He's won awards from HL7. He's done amazing work in this area. He's also involved with the learning health community. We have Jonathan Silverstein, who his last name could well be Silvertongue. He's just poetic and puts things together beautifully. He's a pioneer in computational medicine, computational informatics, and it's really not an understatement to say some of the absolute biggest names, biggest companies in this field that he would absolutely recognize go to him for advice on a regular basis. And he's literally been involved in some way in helping with almost everything I've done. The community, with Michigan, he's just been incredible. Let's see, I think. Oh, Richard Tannen, of course, is on the also on the interim steering committee for the learning health community, and he is on the board of directors for the Cantor Family Foundation with me. Richard has an absolutely amazing career. He's developed all kinds of methodologies to really figure out how you can work with real-world data and get valuable, truthful results out of them. And I really consider him to be a champion of truth in this arena. He's developed some of the most cutting-edge methodologies, and he's one of the most articulate vocal advocates for saying we need to be learning things from this data. I guess also on the Cantor Foundation board of directors with me is Ahmed Ghouri, and he is someone who, like Richard also, they have both published more papers, academic papers in prestigious journals than I think I've ever read, and that is just pretty amazing for both of them. Ahmed has built businesses. He's an anesthesiologist by training, but I promise you his speech is not going to put you to sleep. He's really dynamic to work with. He's incredible because he's just someone who can connect so many different things. Genomics, technology, clinical medicine, research, entrepreneurial skills, and he's just done absolutely amazing things in this area. And I think it's Charles Bailey, who he's the one person I haven't had the privilege of working with directly. I've worked with other people on his team. And I'll say there's going to be a point later on where I talk about some things that are wrong with our healthcare system because it doesn't learn. And Joe's a fan of saying, if I ran my business the way they ran healthcare, it would be broken in a week. And I give a hypothetical business for healthcare with a CIO that throws away 97% of the data, a CFO that wastes $1 out of $3. I say the one thing they're doing right is childcare. And his work at PedsNet is just one example of why that's the case. And they're doing amazing pioneering stuff there. I think, is there anyone I didn't get to? Okay, so you have this absolutely amazing panel. And by the way, if anyone does not like the introduction I gave them, oh, that's hard. If anyone doesn't like the introduction I gave them, this is when I introduced E-Patient Dave. I Googled until I could find a picture of him from 1969 to put on there. I didn't do that to any of you. Sorry, I'm a little out of order. So how do I set the stage for this panel of disruptive innovators? As always, Joe loves to give me hard things to do, even I'm not the executive director anymore. So I'm going to try to talk today, what's this LHS vision we're working towards? What are the impacts of it? Why is it urgently needed? how has the landscape changed in the past few years, and why are we holding this webinar now? What's our shared challenge, and how do we move this forward together? And I thank all of you who are listening for being a part of this. So this is, at one point, I decided I'm going to leave some of my slides, and there had to be in templates, in the original templates. And the reason I'm doing that is I want to give a preview of some of the places I've spoken about this, and everyone else here has gone to even more places. And I just want to get a sense of how big this movement has gotten in just a few years, how many places this has been talked about. So you'll get to see some of the places I've talked implicitly. This is this panel. It's a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens, each knowing many others, who are going to change the world together. So what's this big idea, the learning health system? This insane idea. The Institute of Medicine, which has published like 15 reports about this since around 2007, defines it as one in which progress in science, informatics, and care culture align to generate new knowledge as an ongoing natural byproduct of the care experience, and seamlessly define and deliver best practices for continuous improvement in health and healthcare. That's a mouthful. Joe Cantor and I, when we were working together, at least one way of explaining his vision as I see it is you electronically capture data from any source you can of patients' real-world health experiences. You find ways to incentivize sharing of this data so researchers and other stakeholders can learn from it, and you share lessons learned back so clinicians and patients can be empowered to make better decisions. As Joe says, what works best in every disease, scientific knowledge. There are clinicians that will back this up. This is Bob Rook of RAND, who's asked the question as to why, as a physician, it's impossible for him or any other to have the information they need. And I was asked the question, why is it that you can sometimes get better data for what kind of toaster to buy than what kind of treatment to have? We got to change that. In a learning health system, every patient's characteristics are in principle available for study. Best practice knowledge is immediately available. Improvements continuous. This happens routinely, economically, almost invisibly, and it's all part of the culture. This is at scale, at any scale if possible, even national or global. I'm going to skim through these slides, but basically this is about the spirit of this thing. I had the privilege of speaking at a conference of amazing patient activists, and I just was amazed. Every one of them, after going through their horror story as they were getting out of it, I just want to share what I went through so no one else has to go through it. And you know what? That's sort of what the spirit of the learning health system is. It's taking that and marrying it with technology, policy, governance, incentive, people, and culture to make learning from everyone's experiences possible. At sort of an individual level, it's like one of these full learning loops, a platform that enables a lot of them. And there's sort of a picture of what it looks like at a national level. Another way of thinking of it, this is a concept that made it to the first issue of the Cancer Journal, this idea of a ripple of health. Every single experience is a little ripple. By itself, it's not that doesn't mean that much, but you find a way to synergistically fuse them, and they go from being ripples to being waves, to being currents that actually move things and change things over time. I got to present it to Lilly, and I talked about there that they can be a part of democratizing health, conserving human experience to move things forward. Their CEOs talked about the innovation engine being broken. I said this could be the fuel for it. This is what can power the next generation of innovation. In the public health arena, I'm an alumnus of Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. That saving lives millions at a time is their motto. What about getting millions of people involved in that and empowering them to save their own lives and save others, giving them the tools they need to be a part of the movement? It's one infrastructure that supports public health, supports research, supports quality improvement, supports patient engagement. These aren't separate things. There's one theme, though, is we got to break down silos. We got to not look at conflicts and look at win-wins. Look at how you bring things together, not tear them apart. And that's all the process of learning how to learn. It's bringing all these things together. About not reinventing the wheel every time you want to learn. We're going to hear some great examples of learning cycles. And we'll make some of the examples we're going to hear today more profound. There's a lot of people about how to build them entirely from the ground up. What if some platforms existed so you could have a chance at it? I also speak in front of lawyers about chasing truth, in front of healthcare executives about competitive advantage. I think it's also important to realize the impacts of this thing are beyond just the health of individuals and the physical health of the system itself. It's about creating an infrastructure like the internet that's going to keep improving. It's about building new models of multi-stakeholder and transdisciplinary collaboration. It's really giving the gift of health and something even more profound. I've talked about this in Michigan. I used analogies with automobiles. I've used internet analogies. There's an urgency to this. This is a quote from President George W. Bush about terrorism, but I think the same thing could be said about the trajectory of healthcare. Joe Cantor recently wrote an op-ed in the Philadelphia Inquirer and similar ones in a few other newspapers of record. saying, in 1 hour in this country, 68 people die of heart disease, 65 die of cancer, I think 50-something medical mistakes. We waste, I want to say it's $86 million an hour, and a bunch of other statistics like that, and we don't learn from any of it. And when you don't learn from any of it, it's literally insane. You're doing the same thing over and over, and you're expecting different results, and you're not usually getting them. Today we have a non-learning, in fact, non-health, non-system. Data from patients' experiences reside in silos. Best practice knowledge goes in the journals. It sits in these journals for 17 years. Studies and practice are not connected to each other most of the time. That's still the exception. And learning is still very cumbersome. It's not routine. So, and we have a blame culture, not a safety culture. That's got to change. I have a whole bunch of slides about the urgency that I'll leave online that you can look at later, but I think this is a key message. We waste more in healthcare than we spend on public education, and we're not learning from it, so we keep doing it. So even if health isn't an issue that's important to you, if there's some other issue that's really, really important, odds are what we're wasting in healthcare could make a huge impact in that arena if we can get some of it back. It's criminal. We're handing almost $300 billion a year to criminals, according to Don Berwick. We can't afford to keep going like that. This is the hypothetical I referred to earlier. Again, Joe Cantor. If I ran my business the way healthcare runs, we'll be broke. We have a CEO who said we rank next to last on some major indicators. A CFO who's throwing away 30 cents of every dollar and doesn't know which one it is. A CIO throwing away 97% of the data because fewer than 3% of patients are in clinical trials. And the chief knowledge officer. Level A evidence is only getting there 11% of the time. That's according to the head of the NIH who said that. We have a mailroom that takes 17 years to deliver a letter. But we have child care, that's the exception, which is a lot of effort has been made to get children with cancer into clinical studies. There's a lot of amazing things going on in that arena. So we're learning from a much larger percent of kids than we are from adults, and we made major strides in some of them. You're going to hear about that later. I'm going to skip through. These are other evidences of problems that we're having. If we don't learn from everyone, we're also not even learning from a representative sample. The people in clinical trials are not representative. The CEO of pharma has said that. We're painfully slow. Things aren't getting into practice. I'm trying to move ahead so we can get everyone to talk. And I think Bill Clinton said it best. The way we're doing things. This is a photo of me and Chuck Friedman meeting Bill Clinton at HIMSS 13. He said it best. The way we're doing things is not sustainable. We can't afford to keep doing this. And by implication, we can't afford not to try the learning health system. So I mentioned it couldn't be done at the beginning. To sort of bring everyone up to speed on what's going on, I'm going to tell that as an it couldn't be done story. Going back to 2011, there had been a PR campaign on health IT for our country. And Joe Cantor and I were doing a lot of work in the patient engagement arena that had gotten their attention. And ONC was building a website featuring health IT stories of patients, and they loved the idea of running one about Joe Cantor. And they wrote up a beautiful story for him. And then, I don't know if I should say this or not, but I'm saying it. In the typical way of politics, some stuff came up, some stuff happened in Congress, and they suddenly got very concerned. And although they eventually issued a strategic plan that talked about rapid learning, this was not going to be a front and center issue in 2011. And from there, just when it rains, it pours sometimes, Joe and I kept running into other people who told us it can't be done for this reason, it can't be done for that reason. This group's not going to buy in, that group's not going to buy in. At the same time, the meaningful use incentive payments were going out, and they absolutely, if you look at the graph on the top right, led to major rapid expansion and adoption of EHR systems and high-functioning ones. They catalyzed multiple times their amount, maybe $100 billion or more in spending, and they did a lot. But I got to know one person at ONC who was saying, meaningful use is rewarding achieving a certain status. And by definition, rewarding a bunch of individuals for achieving a status is not going to build a system. And that was Chuck Friedman. And I read something about him in Pastor Cure's Still Thinking Research. It's a great report worth looking at. And as soon as he left to go to the University of Michigan, I gave him a call and said, you said that the way things are going are good, but by themselves won't realize the LHS. How do we realize the LHS? And he's, among his many talents, he's also a student of history and studied the way the Dumbarton Oaks Conference gave rise to the United Nations. And we proposed, the Joseph H. Cantor Family Foundation sponsored the Learning Health System Summit that tried to be for the learning health system what the Dumbarton Oaks Conference was to the UN. We brought 80 individuals, including all the folks I mentioned on the steering committee that helped plan it and many others, to agree on a set of core values. And while that may sound simple, that really gave a foundational basis how to think about moving forward with this. It gave a basis for discussion, gave a real basis for thinking it through. And we really got the ball rolling on building a movement. These are the core values. They're on the learninghealth.org website, and they're worth taking a look at. Some people there, this is not me, but some people said we were starting a revolution that night. And the way they know they were starting a revolution, among many other things, artists, musicians showed up. And that's how you know you got a revolution. Okay, so, and that was an amazing event. Really, really fun to be a part of, and I'm grateful for them. So this is the steering committee, and you'll notice that the people that helped plan the summit, and not only did they help plan it, but they've stuck around for 2.5 years, and they keep going, trying to move this forward, trying to move forward what we got started there. And you'll see the people that are on, folks I mentioned, Jonathan Silverstein, Janet Marcher-Broda, Richard Hannon, Holt Anderson, have been involved since the beginning in helping to move this forward, and many other great people. These supporters of this really came out strong. The CEO, Geisinger, wrote a letter to all his colleagues saying, you got to support this. Major organizations like HIMSS and AHIMA came out with press releases, really wanted to move it forward, invited us to speak at conferences, did everything they could to help. We started going global. Schools and other entities in the UK and participated. Lambda Solutions in Canada issued a press release. I don't have that here. And this community really started taking off as the place to galvanize this grassroots movement to realize the LHS. It's catalyzed some initiatives. You'll hear about 2 of them later on today. As a testament to what's been going on, we really have to have some powerful feedback. I just thought of 2 examples I wanted to include. And although they're in my inbox, these are not about me. These are about the movement. So one talks about, I want to acknowledge you for standing for something greater than themselves. That's what everyone in this movement stands for. Another said, I saw a similarity between the work of you and Chuck Friedman and everyone else involved, and the representatives from the 13 original colonies gathering for the Continental Congress. You're moving towards something inevitable. So on the topic of it couldn't be done, we now have 72 organizational endorsements of these core values and over 1,500 people on the email list. And they said, the pharma companies, they're never going to buy on. It is a threat to their business model. You know what? Glaxo is signed on. Sanofi is signed on. Actually, someone from Frank Rockwell from Glaxo is on the steering committee. The many multi-stakeholder groups like HIMSS, AHIMA, AMIA have signed on. Folks from the UK have signed on. The vendors, they're never going to go for it, I was told. It's a threat to all of them. But we got General Electric. We got ASLI, which is a small one making big things. We got Siemens, which was bought by Cerner, which is like the #2 in size vendor. And then we got Epic. There's so many others on here, major health systems. Folks they said would never want to do this. Everyone's coming together. Everyone wants this. And, those who said it couldn't be done, this is the start of it getting it done. And not only they're signing on, but they're sending people to help with things and putting, some have put money, a lot have put a lot of time in. And it's pretty extraordinary, the patient groups. So those who said this is not going to happen and it's not going to reach out, it did. There have been words about all this stuff too. There was an op-ed in the New England Journal of Medicine, in JAMA Pediatrics, Arnold thing with the Journal of Medicine, calling for realizing a learning health system just to solve some of our major health spending issues, calling for a pediatric learning health system. There's the Cancer Journal, this started all about was the Johns Hopkins. There, of course, are the IOM reports that have continued to grow. I think there's 15 of them now. HIMSS, AHIMA have donated space. The Jason report was all about the learning health system, the second one. National Science Foundation funded this idea, workshop around building a new science. That got published in JAMIA, and it led to other workshops, and many more than this, public health, you name it. You name it, they've been talking about this the past few years. And lots of people, even people outside of this traditional health IT space are talking about it. And you put all that together, and guess what happened, I think it was less than 2 months ago, is ONC, who for a while was not using the term learning health system, released a roadmap for the next 10 years. And while we can't wait 10 years, I am thrilled that they said the goal for 10 years, the single overarching goal, is realizing the learning health system. And you know what the core values those 72 organizations endorsed? The preamble's right in their draft plan. And that is pretty remarkable. And they said it couldn't be done years ago. It's now the policy of this country to try to make this happen in 10 years. Our job is to put the pressure in to figure out how to make it happen in 5 or 2 or even quicker. But pretty amazing. Further testament, there was an entire issue of health affairs devoted to it. This isn't words, this is stuff that's happening. PEDSNet got talked about in it, and so many other, which you'll hear about later, and so many other networks, Corey funded things, and other real great learning projects have been funded in this, as they've been talked about. This is all happening in the context of a people-powered health revolution. That's hard to say, but it's happening. And then, at HIMSS 14, so I mentioned Joe Cantor likes to talk about what works best. Well, Hillary Clinton gave this amazing speech. That's me and Holt with her. And she gives an amazing speech talking about we got to share this data so we can learn what works and what doesn't. You know what? She got standing ovations. And she got every trade person saying Clinton's bringing her A game. She's doing great. This idea is getting out there, and it is catching on. And there's more than words. It's action. Just 2 or 3 days ago, Apple was talking about their watch, and they built research kit to go with their watch. It's going to enable sharing of all this data that's being captured on the phone, the watch, and things people carry with them. There are learning islands. We mentioned Geisinger, Kaiser, the VA. There's these networks, you get like PedsNet, PopMedNet, there's grant programs, NIH is funding things, PCORI is funding things. President Obama in his State of the Union made a big point that we need a precision medicine initiative. There's ASCO's Cancer Link, and there's so much more that I don't have to mention. Within the community, we have 2 major initiatives underway. I'm not going to say much more than we hear about them from 2 of their facilitators. And my goodness, if people stepped up. For example, under the CDISC Estelle initiative, which you'll hear more about, Institute of Medicine has donated space. Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality has donated space for meetings. Duke University has donated space. Texas Medical Association, CDISC itself. And you know what? People have flown all over the country multiple times, participated in webinars and done so much. Similar pattern with Enchica, and you'll hear about these. So we have all these foundational elements. We have words. We have enablers. We have the data itself is getting captured digitally at increasing rates. We have learning islands, networks, grant programs, and so much more. First in the nation academic department at Michigan that I'm very proud to have been a part of, to be a part of creating this multidisciplinary scientific community that is forming. Jonathan Silverstein's been involved in that from the get-go. And this grassroots movement and the initiatives. There's just so much happening, and what needs to happen, though, is bringing all of this together. That's what we need to do. If we bring it all together so it's not happening in silos, we can really move it forward. And this is how I've ended presentations in the past, talking about the urgency, collaboration, the vision. And the issue is bringing it forward is not a technical challenge, or not a purely technical challenge. Does technology play a role? Absolutely. But even the smartest technology people I've talked to says there's social elements, there's economics, there's all kinds of other issues. And that's why a panel like this, where we have such a diverse perspective, including technology people, but including so many other kinds of stakeholders, is just exactly what we need to solve it. Like the internet, the learning health system is something that's emergent. Chuck Friedman has used a city analogy that you absolutely need people who know how to build the buildings. And there's a lot of skyscrapers going up right now in this system. And you need people who know how to build each piece of the buildings and build them well. But you also need power connected to all of them. And you need the roads and the sewers, and you need some governance for the whole city and building codes. And you know what? If you take that analogy, we have people on this panel who've done each piece of that, the learning health system. And we have Joe Cantor, it's Greenbelt, Maryland. Joe actually built a city. He built Greenbelt in 1937. So that's the kind of leadership we need to make this emergent thing happen. So that's our collective challenge. We're putting the puzzle pieces together to build this thing, and we're going to make it happen. And people in this room and a lot of others, we have to. We can't afford not to. The learning health system is a big, hairy, audacious goal. As we say in the vision section of our Department of Learning Health Sciences, it's a really big question. How do we catalyze and sustain and continually advance a massive socio-technical transformation, touching everyone's life and health, encompassing a sixth of our nation's economy? When it could take years or decades, but there's an urgency to it, and we need to get every stakeholder involved, and we got to do it now. So Joe is going to talk to you about how to think this through and how to think about your role in it when he gives his speech. What I want to say is, we've heard so many stories that it couldn't be done already, and that is probably the most valuable lesson I learned from Joe. And Jonathan Silver's going to laugh at me now, but the most valuable thing I learned was this poem that sits on his desk but introduced to the movement. I think has become the anthem of the movement by Edgar Guest. I'll just close on that note. Someone said that it couldn't be done, but he with a chuckle replied that maybe it couldn't, but he would be one who wouldn't say so till he tried. Somebody scoffed, he'll never do that. At least no one has ever done it. But he took off his coat, he took off his hat, and the first thing he knew, he'd begun it. There are thousands to tell you it cannot be done. There are thousands to prophesy failure. There are thousands to point out to you one by one the dangers that wait to assail you. But just buckle in with a bit of a grin. Just take off your coat and go to it. Just starting to sing as you tackle the thing. It couldn't be done, and you'll do it. And thank you, Joe, for sharing that with me when we first met. Thank you for modeling that, and thank you for teaching that.